like, I think people were really nervous, man, after that game one loss, because
Oh,
obviously
of course.
Tavares goes down and you're thinking like, oh my goodness, like we've gone through, the Nazem Kadri suspensions last year, Jake Muzzin,
Yeah.
obviously with that injury in the Columbus series, that scary incident, similar in a way to the Tavares incident, right? So you're just thinking, here we go again. The Leafs can't catch a break. They lose game one. It's going to be an uphill battle in a series that we all thought the Leafs were going to dominate. Now, obviously, now that we've seen 4 games, we've seen the true colors of both of these teams. And we've seen that the Leafs have, for the most part, outclassed the Montreal Canadiens. But Lepore, the big talking point, obviously, we both alluded to this, was that John Tavares freak incident.
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing. How much does this matter from a hockey perspective? Now, listen, the series against Montreal isn't over. I mean, personally, I think it's over because I cannot see the Montreal Canadiens beating this Leafs team 3 times in a row, especially with how that Habs offense is operating at the moment. But how
Yeah.
much is this Tavares injury going to matter the further the Leafs advance in the playoffs?
I don't know how else to put it, and I'm going to sound like Captain Obvious, but the further this team goes and the better opponents it faces, it's going to become more significant because it's about depth, it's about scoring, it's about a 200-foot game. He's an important player to the Toronto Maple Leafs, as John Tavares would be an important player to any team in the National Hockey League. Like, to your point about how this was so Maple Leafs, I was saying to someone, and not that I would ever want any player to get hurt, but 16 teams make the playoffs. So there's 8 series. A player gets hurt within minutes of game one. It has to be a Toronto Maple Leafs player. It has to be the captain, John Tavares. Like, of all situations to occur to
Man.
all teams, of course, it was the Toronto Maple Leafs. Again, God forbid things go easy. But it's big. And the thing, something, and this is kind of like a broad topic, like sports topic, even beyond hockey, is when people say, oh, injuries aren't an excuse. I hate to break it to everyone, but injuries are an excuse. To the person who says that, I'm always quick to respond, why do you want good players? Because if injuries aren't an excuse, it means that good players don't matter. Well, good players matter. If you remove good players, it makes your team weaker. So yeah, this makes things harder on the Toronto Maple Leafs. I mean, they've been able to pull through this series now with a 3-1 lead. Moving forward, if we are fortunate enough to end this series and move on to Winnipeg, I still think the Leafs would be pretty heavily favored in that series against the Jets, even without JT. But it's that third round where if you're playing a Bruins team or you're playing a Colorado team, a Carolina, Vegas, one of those teams, now that depth becomes something. That added scoring power becomes something. At the end of the day, I think different teams have reasons why they can beat other teams. And not only Leafs fans, I think all hockey fans would point to Toronto and say, it's because of Matthews and Tavares down the middle. That's where very few, if any teams at all, can match up with the Leafs. And if they are going to go deep and take a shot at the cup, it's going to be because of that. Now that that's been removed, that's a lot. That's a lot. Now we don't know how long he's going to be gone. You mentioned the knee injury, so 2 weeks is a wrap. But hopefully we're lucky enough to see John Tavares later in the playoffs, a rested, healthy John Tavares. And pull through it. I mean, it may work as a rallying cry, but it also may come to a point where playing $11 million lower than you're supposed to be playing just catches up with you.
Yeah, it's just really, really tough. Like, I've been really impressed with how the Leafs have responded, and to see their depth players and the contributions that they have made so far in this first round series. It's been awesome to see. Guys are stepping up. And this is something that we haven't seen from the Leafs in the past, right? And I mentioned, right, the Kadri suspensions. He goes down and you just had this feeling like, uh-oh, like there goes our number 2 center. Like, who's going to step up? And then even last year in the playoffs with Jake Muzzin, right? Because the Leafs blue line was so thin last year compared to this year. So Jake Muzzin goes down, and it honestly felt like losing like Alex Pietrangelo, even
Yeah,
though
for
he's
us
like
it was.
half the
Yeah.
player of like a Pietrangelo or, you know, a defenseman like that, or Victor Hedman, right? You lose Jake Muzzin and it's like, oh my God, like we're screwed defensively, right? Whereas this year, it's like Tavares goes down and it honestly just has not mattered. Now, is that because the Montreal Canadiens just aren't very good? Yes, I think that is playing a role in this entire equation. But this Leafs team, Kyle Dubas did an awesome job building the depth, you know, in the offseason, making acquisitions at the trade deadline. Obviously, Nick Foligno hasn't played the last 2 games either.
Yeah.
So if that doesn't show you how deep this team is, I don't know what will. But yeah, going back to the Tavares conversation, you can look at the Lightning last season and how they won the Stanley Cup essentially without Steven Stamkos. I know he made an appearance in the Cup final and scored in his 3 minutes of ice time or whatever it was. And that was insanely impressive. Like, I did not think that that team was capable of winning a Stanley Cup without Stamkos, as great as Kucherov is, as great as Braden Point and Victor Hedman are. But, so, I mean, I guess if you're a Leaf fan, you can look at that and say, that's a team that throughout the lineup, they're very deep at every position. They have great goaltending, and that's how they were able to overcome the loss of Steven Stamkos. But
Yeah.
I think as we continue to advance in the playoffs here, Lepore, like you said, man, you could say that the biggest advantage that the Leafs have is that 1-2 punch at center. Austin Matthews and John Tavares. And like you mentioned, if they got to go up against a Colorado, Tampa, Carolina, Boston, that's going to be tough, man, without John Tavares. Like, do I think that they can get through the second round without JT? Yeah, I do. I honestly think they can. But the further you go and when you're matched up against one of those elite teams without your $11 million captain, that's going to be an issue. So we'll see how that goes, I guess, as the playoffs go on.
For sure.